Hi, I'm Debra Band. One of the things I look forward to most during Rosh Hashanah is the communal reading of the story of Hannah at the beginning of 1 Samuel. This is the tale of the birth of the founder of the Israelite monarchy. Hannah's tale was matched as the Haftarah with the tale of Sarah's divinely assisted conception of Isaac. In both stories, God answers the hopes of long childless, and in Hannah's case, depressed women, and is also celebrated as the beginning of silent prayer. The tale raises, though, another theme that receives far less attention, yet in our day is equally essential, and that is faithful leadership, in particular of the nation. As we prepare for our days in audience with the Almighty, let's explore the lasting import of Hannah's struggle. Now, I was fortunate to conceive and bear children easily. I was jolted into sharp awareness of my luck when a long childless co-worker confronted me angrily when I was backed into announcing my first pregnancy at an office party. Since that long ago afternoon, I've encountered many women who've struggled through difficulties conceiving, carrying, and bearing healthy children, of course. Each time I'm reminded of the human realism of this tale, which may well have been first recorded by Hannah's famous eldest son, Samuel. Some years ago, as part of my recovery following the early death of my first husband from cancer, I sank myself into the preparation of an illuminated manuscript of Hannah's story, published in my book, Arise, Arise, Deborah, Ruth and Hannah. Hannah's tale is personal, yet it embodies essential national values and behavior for the nascent nation of Israel. Not only sensitivity to childlessness, not only the value of personal prayer, but also the importance of honest national leadership. Jewish tradition has granted Hannah's story a prominent niche in Jewish liturgy as the Haftarah for the first day of Rosh Hashanah, paralleling the prescribed Torah reading recounting the birth of Isaac. In the Hannah story, personal emotion takes on national significance. Her tale begins in abject depression. Deeply loved by her husband, that's clear, mocked by the second wife whom he took in the face of Hannah's childlessness, Hannah has withdrawn into an impenetrable bubble of grief and humiliation. But why was Hannah's childlessness so noteworthy that it begins the story of the man who established the Israelite monarchy? Why must this great leader be born of a long childless woman? Samuel's hardly the first of Israel's leaders born to women who bore children with difficulty. As we read on the first day of Rosh Hashanah, of course, Sarah bore Isaac at the laughable age of 90, only after angelic prophecy. Rachel was long barren before giving birth to Elkanah's ancestor Joseph, and she died giving birth to her younger son Benjamin. Even Moses' mother, Yocheved, was one of the Israelite women in Egypt who had to coax her husband into marital relations so that she might conceive a child, contrary to that enslaved husband's reluctance. In each of these cases, Israel's providential God needed to tweak normal human affairs to create the necessary leader. As first wife, Hannah had a role to fill within her family, even without children. As archaeologist Carol Myers, in her Rediscovering Eve, Ancient Israelite Women in Context, observes, Iron Age Israelite tribal communities consisted of households that combined complex mixes of generations and familial relationships. Within these households, a spectrum of economic and familial activities took place, including farming, livestock management, household crafts and management, and of course, child raising, all bent on achieving self-sufficiency for the extended family. We can't know exactly what tasks were specifically apportioned to women, but scholarship suggests that women were integrated into every aspect of household life. Yet, childbearing obviously was essential to producing the sons necessary for the proper inheritance and care for the family's all-important land portion. Men did primarily inherit in those days. In Israel, as in the ancient Mesopotamia of Hammurabi's code, if his wife did not produce an heir, a man might take concubines or additional wives. Not only might the childless wife suffer the emotional pain and humiliation described for Hannah, but she could well face sudden impoverishment upon the death of her husband. The early rabbis responsible for much of the rabbinics on this, the midrash on this, were fully sensitive to the plight of the childless woman. exploring Sarah's gift of her servant Hagar to Abraham. In Genesis Rabbah, the main collection of Midrash on Genesis, the rabbis note that children often appear only after, quote, pain and toil. And they ask, why were the matriarchs barren? The answer they suggest is that the Holy One, blessed be He, yearns for their prayers and supplications. And as we know, it was through that yearned for prayer, by the very invention of silent prayer in Israelite history, that Hannah's own yearning found fulfillment. Unusually in the Hebrew Bible, the storyteller shares with us not only Hannah's actions, but also her emotions, in fact, her husband's as well. Already in the 5th verse, we learn that Elkanah's second wife is her rival, with the power to make her miserable about her lack of children. Far from neglecting his beautiful, graceful, but evidently barren wife, Elkanah fully senses Hannah's pain and does all he can to comfort her, playfully nudging her. We can almost see him chucking her under the chin. Don't I mean more to you than 10 sons? The storyteller shares with us the romantic love that draws Hannah and Elkanah together, despite the pain of her childlessness. Hannah accompanies Elkanah on his seasonal pilgrimage to the Israelite shrine at Shiloh. The sources praise Elkanah and his whole family for setting a model of observance and devotion to God for their whole farming community. Yet beyond the family pilgrimage, this despairing wife unknowingly, spontaneously revolutionizes Jewish life. She enters the shrine, sinks down onto a bench, and starts to plead. O Lord of hosts, if you will look upon the suffering of your maidservant and will remember me and not forget your maidservant, and if you will grant your maidservant a male child, I will dedicate him to the Lord for all the days of his life. Now, the high priest Eli, who has never seen such a spectacle, first assumes that the woman is drunk and orders her out of the shrine, until she explains. Just as her husband offers the fruits of their lands on the altar, Hannah offers her silent prayer. Hannah has offered the Almighty the prayer for which God yearns. God quickly answers Hannah's prayer and grants her a completed pregnancy, a first son whom she joyfully names Shmuel. I asked the Lord for him. Hannah voices her emotion in a wild shout of victory after battle, of uplift from obscurity. And as any woman who has borne children, or any man who has accompanied her knows, childbirth is battle. The moment when she rests with her long-desired baby in her arms, triumph. I present Hannah's victory song with a birth canal of sorts, its muscular walls lined with cervical cells, pulsating and twisting with birth contractions, imagery of crowning infants and symbolic plants and animals emerging from her tissues, and an eagle alluding to God's parenting of Israel flying over the scene. But Hannah's emotional trials have not yet ended. The new mother has pledged this first, most remarkable son to the priests at Shiloh to raise for divine service, knowing that upon his weaning, they must part. Can you imagine her emotional stress at giving up the joy of raising this child? It's hardly a stretch to imagine her apprehension about Eli's parental competence when she beheld his own son's thievery and dishonesty in their priestly duties. Read the story, it's really shocking. Later, when we read of her 5 children later on, we intuit her joy and fulfillment at finally being able to raise her own children and watch them flourish. Private emotion, indeed, that of a woman in a patriarchal society, the author tells us, can take on national significance. Determined to mother her son despite the separation, Hannah would make a little robe for him and bring it up to him every year when she made the pilgrimage with her husband. That's what the story tells us. Now, clothing in the Hebrew Bible does more than simply cover flesh, especially in a priestly context. Clothing and the passing on of clothing conveys authority. For instance, Numbers 20:26 tells how, after forfeiting the right to entering the land by disobeying God's orders concerning the waters of Meribah, Aaron's priestly garb was stripped from him and placed on his son Eleazar. This son literally assumed the mantle of his father's authority. 1 Samuel tells of how Hannah brought a little robe for her son, and they tell this immediately after recounting the corruption of Eli's sons who stole family sacrificial meals right from the cooking forks. This contrast of Hannah's devoted nurturing with Eli's failed parenting, which in my book I compare to Shakespeare's contrast of the valiant Harry Hotspur with the dissolute young Henry V, throws Hannah's and Elkanah's admirable behavior, a model for all Israel, into high relief. After all, the rabbis tell us that every year in their pilgrimage to Shiloh, every season, they would gather other families around them, eventually taking as many as 60 other families to teach them about sacrificing and serving Israel's God. This was highly admirable behavior in that they taught their whole community. And it would be their values of leadership of the community, of devoted parenting, that even from afar would produce the great prophet Samuel, the leader who would establish the Davidic kingdom. Private emotion, indeed that of a woman in a patriarchal society, the author tells us, takes on national significance. And we relive Hannah's trials and fulfillment and her family's leadership values each Rosh Hashanah. This discussion is based on my 2012 book, Arise, Arise, Deborah, Ruth and Hannah, and includes my illuminated paintings and commentary on each of these three biblical women's tales, along with literary commentaries by the renowned scholar of Hebrew literature, Arnold Band. The commentaries explain both the complex religious and national symbolism in the paintings, as well as pointing out the literary highlights and skill of the biblical author. The book can be purchased across the world wherever books are sold, and you can find out more about my Hebrew illuminated manuscripts and book talks at the website on the screen. L'shana tova u'metuka.